Number 1. So this story happened almost 2 decades ago. I never had a place to tell it though until this subreddit. Despite this makes up one of my core memories from childhood because of how creepy it was when I was younger. Apologies for formatting, I'm on mobile. It was around 2008. Me, my mom, my dad, and my brother were on a bus to go to a very popular and well-known mall when I was around the age of 4. At the time, we didn't have a car, so we had to take a few buses from where we lived to get to this mall. This one bus that we got on that led to this mall directly from one of the stops was super crowded. I mean, everyone was riding up on each other crowded. There wasn't much room for any of us to move, so my family and I had to stand. Sometime during the bus ride, when we were getting closer to the mall, I ended up getting separated from my parents, forced behind roughly 2 or 3 people, and unsure of where they, my parents, were. We were near the back, by the rear doors. I was standing just a foot or 2 from the stairs, which led to an elevated area of the bus, and beside me was this old dude, who was sitting in the seat next to me. Something that my parents taught me when I was a kid was that whenever the bus was moving, you were always to hold onto the rails so you wouldn't get knocked around or go flying off. Due to my position on the bus, there was only a singular rail that I could hold onto, the one right in front of this guy's seat. Because of what I was taught, I naturally held onto it so I wouldn't bump into the people in front of me. This old guy, in response, grabs onto my hand, firmly, holding my hand against the rail so I couldn't let go or get away. This man looked like your average grandpa and appeared to be in his 70s, definitely able to overpower me, who was basically just out of toddler range. The facial expression this man made is forever ingrained into my mind. I cannot ever unsee it. Instead of this gentle smile like an old grandpa would make at a child, his grin was much more sinister. And he laughed at me in response to me trying to get my hand free once the bus had stopped and the doors were open. In fact, when the doors opened, he held onto my hand even tighter to stop me from leaving. Thankfully, I was able to wriggle my hand free because of the position in which his hand was at. I've never had a chance to tell anyone this story, so Reddit, here you go. Old guy, let's not meet again. Number 2. I went on a Tinder date some time ago while I was adjusting to a new city I had moved to. I didn't really know anybody there, so I used some online dating apps to see the dating scene around town. I landed one from a girl that seemed just like a artsy hippie type of girl. We had a few exchanges through the Tinder app and then decided to meet up for a drink. I picked her up at her house and she greeted me at the door and gave me a hug. She said the name of a local bar she wanted to go to for us to chat and to get to know each other. I told her I would drive and proceeded to my car. The first red flag I noticed was when I walked to my car and opened the door. She had just followed me to the driver's side and was standing behind me staring. I looked at her blankly for about 15 seconds and asked her if she was going to get in. She said sure, I would love to, and went the long way to the passenger side and around the back of the car. Since I had just met the girl, I figured she had just maybe smoked some weed or something, as I had kind of got the vibe she was a bit of a stoner. As I was driving to the bar, she talked in a very low voice, almost as if she was trying to whisper. I'm not hard of hearing or anything, but I had to ask her to repeat herself several times just so I could make out the full sentences she was saying. When we got to the bar, I made sure we got a seat closer to the back away from most people, just so I could have a little quiet in order to hear her. The conversations honestly carried on as normal from this point, and it was actually a fun time for the time being. We talked about different things we were interested in, and she did bring up she did recreationally use weed and a few other tripping substances like shrooms and such. I am not much of a fan of these, but it at least made me relax in the back of my mind to think maybe she was just high off marijuana, and that rationally explains some of the out there behavior. Granted, I had a few drinks at this point, so I was honestly not thinking straight. I asked her if she wanted to go to my place after drinks, and she agreed. When we got to my place, she had a few more drinks, then she started talking about her jewelry. This is where it gets weird. She told me her jewelry was her big secret and it defined her. When I asked why it was so important, she said, I'm actually Anastasia, and I was never killed in Russia. My jewelry is my link to my past. It was hard for me to take that serious at this point with how much I drank, so I kind of challenged that statement using the little bit I knew about history. At this point, she freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how I don't respect ancestors in history. Then she got quiet and tiptoed right up to me and grabbed me by the neck. She then brought my face eye to eye with hers while still holding my neck. She says at this point, I am a shaman and I will curse you. My ancestors have destroyed many people and you do not respect that. You are from oppressive ancestors and they will be punished. Then she put her hand in a whiskey glass and made a cross on my face and kissed my forehead. At this point I started to sober up a little. I talked her into calming down, telling her I was only joking. Then she slowly started getting back to normal. Then she started talking about her cat fetish. She tells me she has a list of people who she tames to act as cats. I am not about judging people on their fetishes, so I listen in. She then tells me all the things she does to them and starts acting like a cat in my living room. If she had not yelled at me earlier on, I might have almost been turned on by it. My red flags in my head were tingling like crazy at this point, so I just listened and tried not to set her off. She noticed sage on my kitchen counter and asked me to let her light it and bless the house. Side note, I use sage to make my house smell better occasionally. It's kind of a ritual I like to do, but it's mine and mine own, something I take very personally and like to do myself. I tell her no, she can't light it and that it's my thing to do on my own. Then, she freaks out, telling me I am a horrible human being and screaming all over the place. I tell her I can take her home now and she runs to the door and goes outside. As I get outside, she is screaming at the top of her lungs that I am a horrible person and I should go die. I tell her she can walk herself home then, and I go back to my place and lock the door. She then starts banging on the door hard in about 10 minutes, saying she left her phone in there. I grab her phone off the kitchen counter and hand it to her. She tries to barge inside and I block her with my forearm. She then acts like she is about to punch me. I just hold my ground and tell her she is not coming in. She screams she wanted the whiskey bottle we were drinking from. I told her, hell no, because I paid for the damn thing. I slam the door at that point and lock it. I hear her bang on the door for a minute. I then hear her footsteps going down the stairs. I waited about an hour and then went walking outside to see if she was still hanging around. I didn't see her, nor did I ever see her again after that. I know this is probably not the scariest encounter ever, but for the next few nights I was creeped out always walking around the area I lived to make sure she wasn't hanging around. I honestly hope she is okay wherever she is, but I hope to never see her again. Number 3. This happened when I was 12 or 13. Back then, late 80s, there was a curfew for anyone under age. I don't know if that still exists, but it matters for the story. Me, female, and my BFF, female, would walk the neighborhood at night. She would spend the night a lot at my house, and me at hers vice versa, most weekends. We would crawl through my bedroom window and walk around and visit our middle school friends or just go to the park or whatever. We were well aware of the curfew and would run and hide from headlights as we didn't want to get caught. One night, we're doing our thing, see some headlights, and run under a carport. The car pulls into the driveway we're hiding in. Guy gets out, starts yelling,
"You trying to rob me?"
So we run. My friend runs one way, I run the other. I hear her scream, I look back and see she's caught. She has her hands up. I realize that I can't leave her there by herself, so I walk over with my hands up, saying it's okay, we're just kids. Then I see the man has a gun. He's pointing the gun at her and she is hyperventilating. I walk up trying to explain that we aren't trying to do anything crazy, just running from possible cops. He points the gun at me. He's saying something about us trying to rob him. I'm like, no dude, we were hiding from possible cops because of curfew. He made us pull our shirts up to show, supposedly, that we had no weapons. But we were 13 years old, so thinking back, he might have just been a perv. He let us leave after that. This was 30 years ago. I often wonder what would have happened if I just kept running. I also wonder what would have happened if I or my friend had told an adult about it. I mean, it was a few streets from my house. He could have been identified. Or maybe we were, ultimately, the bad guys. Number 4. The following story contains a passing third-person mention of sexual assault. Timestamps in the description below. Last year I was going out for drinks with my friends, but since I had to go to uni the next day, I only stayed till around midnight. My boyfriend promised to pick me up and go home with me because I don't like to take the subway alone at night, but since I was pretty drunk by then, I took a little too long walking out of the pub. Unfortunately, we had to wait for the night bus with multiple stops since the subway closes on weekdays at night. For context, my boyfriend and I don't live together but very close to each other, around 15 to 20 minutes walking distance. Both areas are pretty shitty. He lives near a train station, many crackheads, homeless, and sketchy people around, and I live in a cheap, bad district with a high crime rate. My building has 2 entrances on 2 different streets because it's a corner building site leading to a patio and then to the apartment building and its doors. To get to my apartment, I have to open 3 doors. I usually take the entrance door that is nearer to the subway and on the side of my apartment. We had to take 2 buses to go home. One drove us to the train station and the next one from the train station to my apartment. After getting out of the first bus, we realized that we would have to wait for around 20 minutes or something for the next bus to come, and since I really had to sleep at home, class the next day, I didn't want to stay at his place. My boyfriend didn't want to wait, so he persuaded me to walk instead of taking the bus, which sober me would have never done. But since I was still drunk, I didn't care how we got home, so I agreed. So we started to walk home and passed a few sketchy people, mostly people selling drugs, etc., but nothing really bad. Then I saw a guy walking in our direction, and I somehow got a bad feeling, so I told my boyfriend that I wanted to change to the other side of the street because I didn't want to walk past him. Suddenly the guy yelled, "Hey!" as if he wanted to ask us something, but we ignored it and continued to walk. He He got louder and louder until he started to yell. I could see from the corner of my eye that he was coming over, so I whispered, "Run," to my boyfriend, took his hand, and ran the fastest I could while he was chasing us. We ran, and then made a turn to the right, the street where I live, and hid. It seemed like he was gone, so I took my keys out and we started running towards my building, taking the other entrance of my building that I normally didn't use. As I was trying to open the door, my boyfriend started panicking, throwing me inside the patio and closing the door aggressively and then pushing me into the building. He explained that the guy came running from the other side of the street, meaning he took a shortcut, probably thinking we were going to run to the subway or bus stops. If we had taken the other entrance, he would have been clearly the faster one. Being in shock, we unfortunately didn't call the police, which I regret. I stopped going out for drinks or clubbing for half a year after this and slept in my boyfriend's place for 2 weeks because I was scared he would come back. I think the worst thing about this is that he really wanted to get us for whatever reason. I still want to know why he chased us for so long. 2 weeks later, a girl a few streets away was raped in front of her building by a guy who chased her home. I wonder if it was the same guy, or just a coincidence. Number 5. Alright, this happened to me about 3 years ago. It was brought up recently with my friends, and they suggested that I post it here. I have gone through therapy for this and trained in firearms because this was the creepiest night of my life. I spent a night in what felt like a horror movie, and it's still so vivid. It was a Wednesday night in the summer. I was off work, my husband was out of town, and our son was staying at his grandma's for the night. I was home alone with my dogs, an 80-pound Aussie mix and my 80-pound German Shepherd Pit Bull mix. I always have issues sleeping when I'm home alone, so I tend to just binge watch TV in the living room until I can't keep my eyes open anymore. This particular night, I remember that the trash pickup comes the next day. I decided to turn on Game of Thrones for a bit, then I would take the trash out. All of a sudden, I realize it's 1:30 a.m. and I still haven't taken the trash to the curb. My house has 2 solid iron gates, one in the front and one to the side door backyard. Lighting on our street, or anywhere in our neighborhood, isn't that great. It's a quiet neighborhood with a lot of families, and you rarely hear about crime here. I looked out the window by habit before I took the trash out, and saw who I thought was my neighbor smoking a cigarette outside of his gate across the street, looking directly at me. For context, this is a normal occurrence. My neighbor across the street hides smoking cigarettes from his wife, so he typically does it late at night in front of his gate. I get off of work late, so I usually see him and we wave, say hi, chat a little, then I go inside and he makes a joke, "You didn't see me smoking if my wife has." So unbothered by seeing the guy, I go outside, grab my trash cans, open my squeaky iron gate, and take them out to the curb. I did not have my glasses on at the time, so as usual I waved and said hello. However, the guy who I thought was my neighbor threw down the cigarette and quickly walked off down the street. It took a minute for me to register that he was not my neighbor. I was a little creeped out because he was clearly staring at my window from the opposite sidewalk, but also maybe it was a guy taking a night walk, not unusual in our neighborhood, and just stopped for a cigarette. I thought I probably weirded him out as much as he weirded me out, went back inside, and laid on the couch with my dogs to keep watching Game of Thrones. At some point I fell asleep, and I woke up hearing my gate squeak and my German Shepherd mix growling. He's extremely protective of our family at home, but he's also the kind of dog you can't take anywhere because he's so friendly in public. My Aussie mix is more passive, but his sheer size and scary bark tends to deter people. He's very friendly though. I quickly got up and pulled back my curtain. My gate was still shut and I didn't see anything. My dog, however, continued to growl at my front door. I looked out another window which had a better view of my front yard and porch. I didn't see anything. Eventually my dog settled back down with my other dog, but I was still uneasy. I ended up watching TV again because I couldn't go back to sleep. About an hour later, I definitely heard my gate squeak. We are the only ones for the heavy cast iron gate, and the noise it makes is so distinct. So I look out the curtain while my dogs are continuing to softly growl. My gate is halfway open, but I don't see anyone. At this point, I'm panicking. In my panic, I couldn't find my phone. I grabbed my wooden baseball bat out of our room, crouched down, and started going through the couch cushions to get my phone. My dogs are oddly still quietly growling instead of barking, so I assumed no one was there. The minute I find my phone, my front door handle starts shaking. I run to the side door to let my German Shepherd mix out. I know he'll protect me and he can jump the 6-foot back gate. My Aussie mix, going crazy, burst out one of our door side lights. I heard the guy say, "Oh shit," and immediately I let out my German Shepherd mix. I jumped up to look out the window and saw my dog latch on the guy's hand. The guy starts screaming and takes off down the street, my dog chasing him. I then become terrified he'll hurt my dog, so I run out with my baseball bat, screaming my dog's name over and over. The next thing I know, my dog is prancing down the street back to me. happy as shit with blood all over his face. I called the police. They took another hour or so to show up and didn't seem to take me too seriously. They said they called local hospitals, but I never heard back. I called my husband bawling and he got on the next flight home. I stayed at his mom's for a few days, too terrified to go home. I did buy my dogs giant ribeyes for being so good and saving me. I don't know what that guy wanted, but since then I've been trained in firearms and self-defense. So, creepy guy, let's not meet, because my dog might want to finish the job he started. Number 6. This story goes back to the year 2015. It was around 8 p.m. and it was summer, so at that time it was just getting dark. I live in a town where crime almost never happens. It is a very safe, rural area with few people. Here all the shops close early, so that night I went shopping around 7:40 and everything was quiet. I didn't have enough money to pay, so I bought what I could, and when I got home I had to go out again to take the rest of the money I needed to pay to the store. I was listening to music. I had bought new headphones and was trying them out. I was walking 2 blocks from my house when a motorcycle with 2 men came out of nowhere. The man behind got out and took out a gun, pointed at my head, and started yelling at me to give him my things. I was paralyzed, but I managed to yell, "No!" He yelled at me again to give him my cell phone. He yelled,
"Give me everything. Give me everything."
And I had just squeezed my cell phone and headphones and yelled, "No, no, these are my things," over and over again. The whole time, his gun was pointed at my face from a meter or less away. When the guy with the gun saw I wouldn't give them anything, he fired. I saw very clearly how he pulled the trigger on the gun. He got on the motorcycle with the other man and they left at full speed. I didn't get shot at. I don't know if it was a real gun or fake, if it had bullets in it or not. I don't know anything. Plus, it was just after dark. But it is the most terrifying experience I've ever had. As soon as they left, I ran out and got to the store where I was going first. I arrived crying and shaking. It was hard for me to speak. I asked for help and they called my mom, who came to pick me up in a taxi because I didn't want to walk home even though it was 4 streets away. That was the first and last time I experienced a robbery attempt. It was the most damn stressful situation I've ever been through. I don't know how to describe the absolute panic I felt when I saw the barrel of a gun in front of my eyes. And all for a cheap fucking cell phone and some headphones. God. They didn't give a shit about a girl's life. They put a fucking gun to my face. I wish that no one has to go through this, much less children. I was lucky, but many are not, especially in the city to which my town belongs, where this is common currency. Thank you for listening. I don't speak English. I do the best I can. Sorry for the mistakes.
Number 7. This happened to me and my friend Nick about 2 months ago. Now, I'd like to start off by saying that I'm non-binary, assigned female at birth, and he is a trans man. Neither of us passed, and we're both under 5'3", 1.6 meters. I'm 19, he's 18. We like to meet up at this cupcake and coffee place, usually around late afternoon or early evening. That day, it was the latter. We have our cupcakes and tea, and by the time we leave the cafe, the sun has gone down. Good time to go home, right? Well, we have this tradition. You see, the cafe was in a strip mall, and it had a Big Lots. Our tradition was that we each buy 1 cursed item from said Big Lots. We bought a carton of Whoppers and a tube of cheese balls. Earlier we had discussed that I would walk him part of the way home, as he had told me that he had a random drunk try and grab him when he was jogging earlier that week in the area that we'd have to walk through. By the time we left, it was already dark out. As we were walking to the school that's between the cafe and Nick's house, it came up in conversation that we didn't really have anything to protect ourselves. I didn't even have my pocket knife with me. But no worries, nothing was going to happen. Right? Wrong. We were almost at the school. Had just crossed the first street needed to get there, in fact, when we heard a car approaching the intersection. We turn and see that the car is a white pickup truck. Both of us immediately got a bad vibe. The car starts to slow down too soon and approaches the intersection too slowly, which is unusual as most of the time cars just speed through. The entire time the guy is watching us. Instead of going through, he pulls over to a lane closer to us and stops, continuing to watch us. He's about 10 feet away, close enough that we can see his face. He was a middle-aged man, but we couldn't see how big he was. We could see, however, that he was grinning. Then we saw someone shuffling in the back of the car, but it was too dark to see what the other guy looked like. The guy's grin faltered when he noticed us staring back at him. Nick is in a fighting stance, ready to bash whoever comes out of the car with a carton of Whoppers, and I'm behind him looking over his shoulder, clutching my carton of cheese balls. I didn't know what made the dude leave, but after what seemed like a solid minute, he drove off. We didn't look away from the car until it was out of eyeshot. Both of us walked away from that encounter feeling like we narrowly escaped something horrible. Now, I know hearing this secondhand may not seem scary, but it was to me, and it's had a lasting effect. Now, I don't go anywhere without pepper spray and a pocket knife. Number 8. I grew up with my dad and brother. My mom died when I was 10. I was 13 at this point, and my brother was 16 and out with friends. I used to go out until late at night drinking in the park with friends. My dad was an alcoholic and always too drunk to know if I was home or not. I had free reign and no rules or boundaries. My dad used to invite random alcoholic, drug-using strangers into the house. Often when I came home, these strangers and my dad would be passed out or asleep from too much alcohol. Or they would barely notice I was there and I'd go straight to my room. One day, I'd come back from being out with friends. It was the early hours. I walked through the living room to go upstairs to my room, and my dad was asleep on the armchair. The guy he'd brought back was around mid-50s. I didn't recognize him. He looked at me and something was off about him. He smiled and stared and tried to start a conversation with me, but I was keen to get to my bedroom. I went upstairs and got my pajamas on for bed and then dashed to use the bathroom. As I was walking to the bathroom, he said to me,
"You look nice in those pajamas."
and he was smiling at me and creeping me out. I went back to my room instead of using the bathroom and I shut the door behind me. I had a lock on my bedroom door and I used that. He was then trying to open my bedroom door and I was so scared because I knew something was off and that he had bad intentions. I dragged my bed across my room to block the door for in case he barged it open and broke the lock. He's knocking on the door.
"I'm just trying to say hello. Don't be so rude. Open the door."
I'm not responding. I'm panicking. I was a smart 13-year-old and I knew I was in danger. The bed is blocking the door and it's still locked and I can hear him pushing against the door, trying to get inside. I open my bedroom window and I scream again and again, "Help! Help! Please!" at the top of my lungs. What I later found out was that my neighbor heard me and knowing my dad was an alcoholic was assuming something had happened to him. He came around. Must have seen that my dad is asleep. He comes up to my room and he's knocking to get in and I can hear his voice, a voice of safety. Although I trusted my neighbor, I'm so shook up that I'm now just sat in a corner of my room in a ball crying, shaking and panicked. He knocks the door open and is pushing it open against the weight of the bed. He came in and checked on me assuming I must be hurt. He just holds me whilst I compose myself and try and explain what has happened. The man is now gone, but I knew he could come back anytime in the future and my dad was never sober enough for me to have been able to explain. This was the final straw for social services, and that's the night I ended up in the care system. I ended up living with my auntie until 16, so I had it easier than most. Number 9. This is the condensed version of posts I made to r/tales from the front desk. Our story begins on a crisp September evening. Since our hotel's restaurants were closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, I was the only employee in the building past 5:30 p.m. Us at the front desk had a habit of sitting in the office and stepping out when we heard a guest approach. This particular evening, my chest was very sore, so I was not in the best mood. While in the office, I hear the lobby door open, so I walk out to the desk. "Hi. How are you today?" The only description I can give for this man is that he looks like one of the actors who has portrayed Spider-Man, so that is how I will be referring to him.
"Hi, I just came from the military base. Is it okay if I use the restroom and charge my phone for a little bit?"
A little background on the hotel. We were located within a state park and had 6 different buildings spread out. The main building where operations were located was a high traffic area, so random people coming in was not unusual. "Yeah, go ahead." I go back into the office. Spider-Man takes care of his business and stops at the desk. He begins striking up a conversation with me about different things. We sold beer at the desk and he had asked me for a recommendation, to which I told him that I was not of age. I was 19 at the time. All that I told him about myself was that I was in school for hospitality management and that I wanted to open my own hotel one day. Spider-Man then begins to go on and on about his line of work. He's a life coach, how he's written 2 books, and just about how he loves customer service. In response to him unnecessarily talking at me, not with me, for like 45 minutes, I'm giving him a lot of, yeah, and, oh really? Wow. As mentioned before, I had chest pain and was not in the mood to converse with guests about things not pertaining to my job or their stay. As we near the end of our conversation, Spider-Man says,
"Wow, I really enjoyed our conversation and would love to keep in touch."
Of course, my response is, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't give out personal information."
"No, not your personal information, your business information."
At this job, I was a FDA, so I had no business information, which I let him know. Spider-Man was being very pushy, so I eventually say, "Oh, I work full-time in the evening, so if you ever come back, you'll probably see me." Hindsight is 20/20. Obviously, looking back, I would not have relayed this to him, but to everyone else who works in the front office, telling people the general time you're in is not inherently weird. Usually when I check someone in, I tell them that I'm there until X time if they need anything. I guess that satisfied him, so he left for the night. Fast forward a week or so, and it is busy. My property had event spaces in 3 different buildings, and I believe this night we had weddings in 2 of them. Since it was a weekend, my coworker and I were split up, so I was doing check-ins at the main building, and she was doing check-ins at the secondary building. The secondary building was on the same road as the cabins we rented out, so we would call all the guests checking into any of those buildings and let them know to head over there for check-in instead of the main building. We were a smaller property, but since we were located in a state park, I had to deal with hotel guests, wedding guests, and park goers, not even mentioning the phone. I was slammed. The phone would ring, I would take care of the guest, and then someone would come to check in or buy something, so I couldn't stop to use the restroom. Amid the chaos, in walks Spider-Man. He comes straight to the desk.
My name. How are you?
Imagine you're me, who had told a random person who was not staying at the hotel the hours you worked the week prior, and they come back and remember your name shortly after. Obviously, you would believe he came back in to see you. I'm shocked, but do not have time for his pointless attempt at a conversation with me. I respond coldly. Hi, is there anything I can help you with?
Yeah, just thinking of grabbing a beer from you and heading up to the bar.
You should head up there first.
What?
The bar. It's closing soon. Go there first. Spider-Man was taken aback but goes up anyway. He comes back down and has the gall to ask me,
Last time I was here you were so nice and talked to me, but now you're being very cold.
I snap at him. I'm not in the mood to have a conversation right now. I'm extremely busy, the phone keeps on ringing, and I can't even stop to use the restroom.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. You can go to the bathroom if you need. I'm fine waiting.
That moment my coworker calls me and asks me to bring her something to the secondary building. I'm very irritated at this point, but at least it will get me away from Spider-Man. No, I have to go to the secondary building. What can I grab for you? He begins to look over at our selection, but just says he would rather come back later and walks away. My coworker calls me back and tells me that she didn't need me to go over there anymore. I tell her briefly about the guy and go on to finally take a piss. My coworker calls me and is asking for help. Our cabins had 6 individually rentable guest rooms, and the lobby area had a communal fireplace. The fireplaces had a tendency to smoke out the building, partially due to guests not knowing how to use a fireplace, them not being cleaned out for the season, and the building's age. Of course, one of the guests used the fireplace, it smoked out the building, and all the guests were upset. We were sold out and had no management on duty, so there was nothing we could do for them in the moment. She tells me that this guy keeps bugging her about a solution, but she would tell me more when she got back to the main building. When she gets back, she tells fully about everything going on with the guests while we are sitting in the office. Someone comes to the desk and she goes out to speak to them. I walk out as well, and lo and behold, Spider-Man was standing in front of me.
Did you get that break you needed?
I say yeah and walk back into the office. When my coworker comes back, she tells me that he was the guy who had been bugging her. Turns out he was a guest and I had no idea. I tell her everything that happened with Spider-Man, and she lets me know that he was talking to her about my amazing customer service and just went on and on about me. Now, I am known to give exceptional service, when I want to, but I never did anything special for him. I wouldn't even say the bare minimum. The following day, I tell my department manager about Spider-Man and say that if a complaint came through about me being rude to a guest, it is because I thought he was coming in specifically to see me. My manager told me it was okay and that the guy was weird. Spider-Man spoke to my manager earlier in the day when he checked out and was talking about something with him being on the run and having police involved. Fast forward to a Saturday in October. We had an event in the main building, so a lot of people were meandering around. My manager, whose hours were always 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., came into work the evening shift with me for whatever reason. By working, he sat down in the office the whole time doing God knows what. There were some guests that needed a ride to the train station and were unable to find one, so my manager, who was a rideshare driver on the side, took 2 separate groups of people over, so he was gone for 2 hours sporadically. Since my manager was there on and off, I couldn't sit in the back and had to stay out front the whole time. I would like to say around 8:30 p.m. I was standing at the desk when in walked Spider-Man. Of course, I recognized him immediately, but decided to pretend I had no idea who he was in hopes he didn't remember me. Hi, can I help you today?
My name. How are you?
There goes that idea. He begins to make small talk with me about random things. I politely respond, not being emotional about anything. Spider-Man then looks at me and asks,
So the other day when I came in, I asked you for a beer recommendation and you told me you weren't of age. I'm just curious. How old are you?
What the actual fuck? I stare at him for a good 5 seconds with a blank expression before responding, I'm 19.
Okay, good to know. You know, my name. I really enjoy talking to you. I love our conversations. Are you comfortable talking with me? or is it more if I have a question about booking?
When I'm conversing with guests, I keep my body very close to the front desk. When talking with Spider-Man, I backed up all the way so I was leaning on the shelving unit that blocked the guest view of our office. Well, I do feel the second way. By the grace of God, he says whatever and walks upstairs to the bar and leaves me alone. My manager was sitting in the office during this whole interaction. I walk back, grab my phone, and make a panicked phone call to my then significant other. I go back to the office and tell my manager that I was going to stay in the back until I knew he was off the property. Spider-Man ended up leaving maybe 15 minutes before the end of my shift. Later on during my shift, I called to have my mid-shift coworker bring me some supply. She calls me when she gets to her car and tells me that she saw and talked to Spider-Man. When she arrives at the secondary building, she tells me about the conversation she had with him. We knew his first name offhand, but I wanted to remember what his last name was. I looked up his first name and first initial off his last name in our system, and what do I see but a reservation under his name booked for that night in the secondary building that was checked in 5 minutes prior by the coworker I was with. I turned to her and asked if she checked him in, to which she said no. I called down to the main building and asked my supervisor if she checked him in, to which she did. I informed her that the man was the one who was being weird with me. She hadn't worked on those days when he had come in, so she didn't know who he was. Supervisor let me know that she had told Spider-Man, "My name is up in the secondary building if you need anything," and he replied with some compliment about my amazing customer service. The coworker that came over to me had clocked out for her break, but I made her sit at the desk until he arrived. When Spider-Man did come, his face fell as he saw my coworker sitting there instead of myself. He talks to her for a little bit, then makes his way to his room. He was one of the closest to the FD. I don't remember exactly what happened after, but I ended up leaving the secondary building a little before 7 p.m. instead of staying there until 10:30 p.m. in an attempt to avoid him. Of course, this was no use since he was already aware that I was on property. Eventually, Spider-Man did see me and kept trying to make conversation with me as if I hadn't already made it clear I had no desire to speak to him in matters unrelated with his stay. He was a very talkative person and kept talking to my supervisor. Already on edge because of the issue with my manager, I needed to let off some steam. I go to the restaurant kitchen and start venting about Spider-Man to the cooks. The FOH manager walks into the kitchen and is like, "Oh, are you talking about Spider-Man? He's a little weird but harmless. He talked about you the other day when he came in. I let him know that you have a significant other. You just have to The FOH manager walks into the kitchen and is like, "Oh, are you talking about Spider-Man? He's a little weird but harmless. He talked about you the other day when he came in. I let him know that you have a significant other. You just have to learn when to tell men that you are uninterested." Being a young woman that works in hospitality, it is not uncommon to have guests hit on you from time to time. Whenever that does occur, I will politely tell them that I'm not interested. Spider-Man was different, however. He never outwardly said that he was interested in me or wanted to take me out, and I did not want to be one of those girls who assumes everyone is into them even though I am. FOH manager also let me know that Spider-Man was 36. I go back down and try to sit in the office for the remainder of my shift, keeping myself busy with schoolwork, only going out when my supervisor needed another body. Spider-Man was at the desk with my supervisor talking about God knows what. We had temps working in the kitchen who only spoke Spanish. Someone asked for me to go help them since I spoke Spanish. When I came back, he goes,
"Oh, my name. You speak Spanish? ¿Cuánto cuesta una botella de agua?"
I replied back in English $2 and walked back into the office.
"Oh, I wanted to talk with you in Spanish."
Ignored. I continued doing my schoolwork in the back. My supervisor's at front at the desk taking her 30, still talking to the guy since she didn't want to leave me there with him. I felt bad even though it was slow, so when a guest came to the desk with a question, I ran out to help them. After assisting the guest, Spider-Man asked,
"My name. May I speak with you, please?"
Again, ignored. Continue doing schoolwork. Supervisor has to walk away from the desk to clock back in. While she's gone, Spider-Man repeats himself.
"My name. May I speak with you, please?"
I'm not sure if it was intentional, but he sounded very authoritative. I go out to the desk. "I'm sorry. I was taking an exam that was timed and due at midnight. Is there anything I can help you with?"
"I just wanted to apologize about asking your age the other day. I didn't mean anything by it, I was just curious."
I thanked him and he continued.
"Like I've said before, I love talking to you. I love our conversations. I've been going through something lately and I feel as though we've really connected."
I interrupt him. "May I be honest with you?"
"Sure."
"Sir, there is a certain way I have to interact with everyone I come in contact with while I'm working. We never had a conversation, you were just talking at me. I don't know if you've noticed, but you make me very uncomfortable and I've been trying to avoid you every time that you've returned."
"Yes, I've noticed, and I'm curious as to why that is."
Now, Spider-Man has never said anything explicit to me, but his vibe is just so off. Since I'm on the clock, I can't just tell him to fuck off, so I try explaining myself in the most professional way possible. Well, you give me a weird vibe. You put me off, to be quite frank with you.
Well, I never did anything inappropriate. Even yesterday when you said that you weren't comfortable talking to me, I just went up to the bar.
I'm just trying to express that you make me uncomfortable. I'm trying to set a boundary.
I understand that you're trying to set a boundary, but I never did anything inappropriate.
At this point, we're going back and forth. He had actually gotten upset with me because I kept calling him sir instead of his first name. My supervisor returns and stands at the other end of the desk silently letting me blow up on this guy. Spider-Man is just not getting the hint, you guys. Remember how the FOH manager told me he was 36? I end up telling him, for a man that is old enough to be my father, you should know well enough not to flirt with a 19-year-old. Y'all, the face this man made. He looks at me, over to my supervisor, and back to me, and goes,
Flirting? I was never flirting. And I don't think you know how old I am. But for Mr. to have been your father, I would have to have had you at...
This fucker literally stands there counting on his fingers.
17 years old.
Is that impossible? People literally have kids at 14. When I'm upset, my voice will get progressively louder. Spider-Man puts his hands up and says,
Whoa, there is no need for you to yell at me. I'm standing right here.
I snap back with, if you have any issue with the way I'm speaking to you, you can contact my general manager. His card is right there.
We don't need to escalate this.
Eventually, I say to him, Sir, you make me very uncomfortable. It feels as though you are coming back in specifically to see me, and for that I would prefer if you don't come back. Again, I was at FDA and had no authority to ban anyone, so this wasn't an official thing, more so me expressing my feelings.
I have every right to come back here.
Yes, sir, you do have every right to come back here. Just as I have every right to leave this conversation. Have a wonderful night. I stomp back into the office. Spider-Man begins ranting about me to my supervisor, being all,
I never did anything wrong. My name is overreacting.
Yada yada. My supervisor is just giving him the head nod because she knows everything that happened and this was out of character for me in terms of guest relations. Spider-Man tries going up to the bar, realizes it is closed for the night, and walks out of the building. My supervisor had to take over all of the end of shift duties so I didn't have to be at the desk. Night Audit comes in, and as I try to explain what happened, Spider-Man walks back in. Night Audit goes out and greets him.
What is your position here?
Night Audit replies in a matter-of-fact tone. Night Audit. Spider-Man asks for my supervisor, who was unavailable, so he tries waiting a few minutes but ends up leaving for the night. I end up having Night Audit and my supervisor's significant other walk me out to my car that night to make sure he wasn't waiting for me or anything. I had off the day after I blew up on Spider-Man. Following my supervisor's advice, I texted my GM asking him if I could call him at some point in the day about what had happened. We agreed to call around 1 PM as I was attending classes in the morning. My AM coworker had texted me after I got out of class. Here is our conversation. AM, he is here complaining about you to manager. I'm trying to eavesdrop. Me. OMG no, because I went off on him yesterday in front of supervisor. I'm talking to GM in an hour or so. Let me know what happens. AM. I will, and I think he heard me warning sales coordinator about it today, so it's about me too. But manager is taking his side so far, so that's fun. AM. Bro, this man is telling manager you had feelings for him. Me. What? He's literally delusional. AM. He is describing to manager about how you guys were having banter and said you shouldn't do that if you don't want anything. Me. We never bantered. OMG, I can't. Given all of this new information, I was able to provide more evidence to my GM about Spider-Man. Surprisingly, my GM actually took the situation seriously. Yeah, no, my name. I'll ban him when I'm back in tomorrow. I know how men can be. Fuck yeah. That's my first win in a while. After I got off the phone with my GM, I called and texted my other coworkers, giving them a full debrief on Spider-Man. The AM coworker that had texted me about him let me know that he was hanging around her as well. She comes in for her shift at 7 AM and he was hanging around the lobby of the main building, so not even in the building he was staying in for a while. AM also told me that our manager was not aware that she had overheard his conversation with Spider-Man. Manager had a whole conversation with me about how he was a safe man, and manager didn't realize I was there when they were having the conversation and came back and told me completely different things than what I heard them talking about. This part is not 100% I heard right, but I'm pretty sure manager told the guy you owed him an apology. The next day I came in for my shift at 3 PM. AM coworker lets me know that Spider-Man was waiting in the lobby for her that day. He was there when she came in and kept trying to talk to her. Night Audit stayed with her until around 8 AM when our GM came. Spider-Man would come over to the desk, realize NA was there, would walk off for a few minutes, rinse, repeat. Eventually he checked out with the both of them. Spider-Man handed him his room keys and was like,
I'm expecting a written letter of apology from my name.
He and my GM actually crossed paths in the parking lot. When GM came in, NA was like, that's the guy. He's fucking weird. Anyway, GM pulls manager and supervisor into his office for a little bit, then grabs me. He basically was like, you need to protect yourself. Why would you entertain the conversation with him for that long? Like, if I wasn't on the clock, I basically would have told him to fuck off. I can't be rude to guests, GM. My name. If someone is acting like that, I'm perfectly fine with you telling them whatever so they can leave you alone. Oh, word? So my manager was the one who made the call telling him he wasn't allowed back. What's funny is that whenever my manager was on the phone, he would always have it on speaker. This time he held that phone up to his ear and was speaking very low so I couldn't hear the conversation. He told me that Spider-Man was all,
"But I love staying with you guys,"
on the phone. I ended up leaving that property in early December. Luckily, I had accepted a higher paying position as an AFOM at the hotel on the local military base. Since Spider-Man had mentioned that he had been staying at that hotel, I was very nervous about accepting the position and feared that I would see him again. My first or second day, I was hanging around the office when a reservations agent got off the phone with a difficult guest. Agent and supervisor who was training me began talking about difficult and weird guests. I had asked them if they knew someone by the name of Spider-Man. Supervisor turns to me in disbelief and says, "Yes, we banned him." What? She brings me into my DOFO's office and they tell me the whole story. DOFO explains that Spider-Man came and stayed with them in early September and was being very odd. He owed some people money and they were after him, so he was trying to be stealth by staying in our hotel. Since we were located on a military base, you needed to show ID before being let in. He kept on pestering the FO employees about knowing if these guys had come in looking for him, and that they should be verifying everyone's IDs as they enter our hotel. Quite literally, none of us were paid enough to do that, nor give a shit, as if that was anyone's job. He would hang around in the lobby areas for a while and just kept bothering FO employees. Someone had let me know that he had actually come in with a woman who appeared to be around his age, if anyone was wondering, and a few days later he came to the desk and said that she had broken up with him and he didn't understand why. Spider-Man had even mailed a copy of both of his books addressed to one of the FO supervisors to the hotel. I think some of the valet mentioned that he may or may not be racist, which I'm not sure of as I myself am visibly a person of color, and so was my old manager. Given all of this, DOFO went to the AGM and was like, something needs to be done about this guy. AGM went to Spider-Man's room, told him that he needed to leave and was no longer welcome for the next 3 months. He waited in the door while Spider-Man packed his belongings up, which he didn't even have a suitcase. All of his things were in laundry baskets and garbage bags. I told him everything that happened at my previous hotel with Spider-Man, so according to the timeline, he stayed at the military base hotel first, got banned, and then stayed at my previous property. Since there were only 3 actual hotels in the area that I worked, 2 of them being properties I had worked at, and the other one being a chain hotel, I wanted to know if he was banned from the 3rd hotel as well. Spider-Man was to call AGM before he came back to check and see if he was good to return on property. He did call a few times, but AGM let him know that he was permitted to return. Luckily, I have not seen him since I blew up on him in October. A funny tidbit for you all. The employees at the military hotel actually held on to the books he mailed in, and I read one of them during a boring shift. This book was horrible. I could open my ass, take a shit on a page, publish it, and it would be better than what he wrote. We've officially reached the end. Thank you to everyone who listened this long. Number 10. Over 4 years ago, I went to work at a warehouse in the small town that I am from. I decided to leave after my health... Over 4 years ago, I went to work at a warehouse in the small town that I'm from. I decided to leave after my health started to get worse physically, and I was diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety after the situation that I'm about to tell you. This changed the way that I developed friendships after that job, that's for certain. So I started this job on April Fool's Day of 2018, which was odd to me, and I had no kind of high expectation of the job. All I wanted was to do my job, get paid, and go home as I had 2 children at home and many things that I could work on there. The job wasn't hard and it made pretty good money from all duties considered so. I really couldn't complain. I worked second shift for about 5 months and I went to day shift. While working on my second shift, I kept to myself mostly until one day I met someone from one of the lines after we struck up a conversation about gaming. For the sake of anonymity, we'll name him JF. Well, JF was a pretty good guy and we had a lot of things in common. I went home that night and he popped up as a suggested friend on Facebook. Again, another oddity, so I decided to add him. When I did, we started talking more at work until he suggested that we should hang out, so we did hang out. Pretty frequently. We were friends for a month at this point, and one day he decided he was going to introduce me to his partner. She seemed decent at first, super nice, didn't seem to be a judgmental type, so I was cool with her. From then on, I would hang out with him when my kids were spending time with my mother. One time we were talking at a restaurant, he started to vent to me. Dude, she's such a bitch sometimes. The other day I forgot to take the trash out and she threatened to stab me if I didn't. I've never been in a relationship where someone's threatened me, but she's got good intentions, dude. When he said that to me, I was concerned, but of course, we'd only been friends for a month, so I thought that maybe he was being morbidly joking, so I chuckled at him. He gave me a pretty serious look and said, "I'm not joking. She really did." That concerned me. Fast forward about 8 months. They're still together and we all hang out pretty regularly, forgetting the things he told me then. One day we were all talking and he seemed a little off that day, so I asked him what was wrong in front of her. He flashed a smirk and said, "Nothing, dude, I'm just a little tired." He didn't have his eyes on me though. He had them on her when I asked that. When we went to work the next day, I asked him again, "Do you promise to keep this between us?" Of course, I agreed. He said that he was breaking up with her and she went a little crazy. He said that she grabbed her gun and pointed it at him and said, "If I can't have you, then no one will." He said that he had diffused the situation and is trying to look for a way out. Not really knowing what to say, I just said, "You'll figure it out, man. If you need somewhere to go then, you can come stay with me until you get her out of the house." Fast forward to another year. I finally decided to leave her. When he did, she flipped out again. This time, he told her over text. She said that she was going to find him and kill him, and he was actually out of work that day with a vacation day. He sent me a text that said, "Hey, let me know if she comes over to work looking for me." That struck me as odd because I had no idea of the situation that was unfolding. She actually did come to our job and she asked me where he was, and I said, "I have no idea. I thought he was with you and you guys went out of town or something." All she did was roll up her window and drive off. I called him and told him that she came by and he called the police about it. They had found her up the road with a loaded gun in the car. 2 months later, he decided to talk to her again, and when he did, he had something to tell me. When he called me, he asked if I had seen her around, and I hadn't. He said I would take some vacation days if I were you. Dumbfounded, I asked him why. He said to me because she's out of jail and her cousins are in town trying to find the people she has personal vendettas with. You're one of them. At that point, I was terrified. I grabbed my kids and went out of town. Took 2 weeks off of work. Come to find out, the next day, her and her cousins went to the next town over and shot 3 people in an apartment and killed them. I got the news about it the day after it happened. The reason why he knew they were coming after me is because they made a Facebook Messenger group that he was included in and sent a list of names. Everyone regarded it as spam and decided to disregard the message, but he knew what it was. 3 of the names on that list were the people that they shot. The 4th name on that list was mine. After they found the evidence and he decided to go public about the group and the screenshots that he had, they were all charged with first-degree murder. From then on, I was very careful about who I would stick my neck out for because even though he knew the context of that list and her intentions, he decided to not inform anyone else on it. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore and I dodged a bullet. Literally. Sorry for the long story, I felt it needed context. Stay safe, y'all.
Hey everyone, I want to keep this as brief as possible. I'm actually going off script, but I wanted to thank you all so much for watching this video. It ended up taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. It was supposed to go up on October 1st, but as you can tell from the upload date, that didn't exactly pan out. I got bogged down in the editing process, particularly working on the 9th story. Whew, boy. This is actually something of a return to form for the channel, given that I got my start reviewing creepypastas and narrating horror stories. I've always wanted to return to this sort of content, and I figured there was no better time than October, spooky season. The original plan was to upload a new horror video on every day of October, but obviously that schedule isn't exactly going to be followed precisely. Nevertheless, I do actually hope to produce the same amount of content, just perhaps differently than I had planned. If you're into this kind of content, horror narration, creepy gaming, that sort of thing, then please hit subscribe, as it would really mean a lot and it helps me keep this channel going. I've actually got a big surprise coming at the end of the month that I think you're all gonna like. And of course, I will continue producing my regular content, including a sprite animation project that should be finished sometime this month. That's the plan. I'm attempting to meet a certain deadline that I'm not going to spoil for reasons that will become clear when we get to that point. For those of you who don't know, I'm finishing up with college, and I'm now able to turn my full undivided attention to my personal projects such as my writing and this channel. I'm hoping to eventually be able to fully support myself by producing content, whether it be online or in written form. So if you want to support me in my endeavors, feel free to contribute to my Patreon if you can. There will be a link in the description below. Big shout out to Giga Chad Kevin McLeod for the music used in this video, as well as to the authors of the stories. Don't forget to like, and until next time, this is Jamie with Carnival Entertainment saying,
Hasta luego.